An Anorian Tale by Demon. Chapter 1. Somewhere in the Anorian Sea. Anoria. The sea was mad. Waves crashed into the wooden sides of the Ginjeshu, tossing the junk around as if it were a child's bath toy. The sky roiled angrily and alight with the white-hot streaks of lightning. Ube held onto the front bulwark, mostly unconcerned. Junks were made with airtight compartments that allowed the shipbuilders to use inferior wood and still make a boat that was damn near unsinkable. The Ginjeshu's captain claimed that the ship was made with the best timber in all of Anoria. A bold-faced lie, to be sure, but it certainly seemed like a well-built vessel. A well-trained crew manned the sails and tiller. A mage continually cast spells on the sailors, keeping them protected from the harsh elements. Ube was denied this luxury and strongly told to stay down below, which he had ignored. If he couldn't handle a little sea spray, sideways rain, or the occasional rogue wave breaking over the bow, then he didn't deserve to wear the sword at his side, let alone command the lives of men and women. This, however, was his only chance to catch a glimpse of the Dai, a giant sea spirit that was said to show itself only during storms over the Anorian Sea. The Ginjeshu barreled down a particularly large swell, crashing nose first into the steep incline of the next wave. Ube was hit with a mass of frigid water that drenched him, then made its way across the deck and out the scoopers back into the sea from whence it came. It was a miserable task to stand out in the elements. He'd certainly be better off below deck with Ni-kon. "Hayakun Logon off the port side!" Someone yelled over the torrent of wind and rain. Ube's heart skipped a beat. The Hayakun Luan wasn't the Dai, but beggars couldn't be choosers. He stumbled to the left side of the ship, making sure to keep his footing as the vessel rocked and jerked in the churning waters. Sure enough, there it was. The Hayakun Lungwan. About as wide as the Ginjeshu and twice as long, the three-masted ship glided through the water like a bird through the sky on a clear, windless day. The deck was lit with unwavering magical lights that gave Ube full view of her crew. A dozen foreign humans, most of which were shirtless, and each with their own skin color, worked a complicated set of riggings that made the Ginjeshus look childish and simple. The ship had a bowsprit that stuck out from her nose like a cavalryman's lance, and Ube could even make out the runes carved into her side. He couldn't read them, of course, but he knew the runes were draconic, and he knew they translated to Dragon's Wing. The Ginjeshu's captain burst out onto the deck. "Where is she?" he shouted over the wind, not needing an answer as he followed the gazes of his men. He too stumbled over to the bulwark, braving the waves as they broke over the edge of the junk. "Feast your eyes on her, boys," the captain shouted. "You might never get another chance to see her." Ube squinted against the ocean spray. Someone on the foreign ship was looking at the Ginjeshu through his spyglass. A smaller set of hands grasped the bulwark next to Ube's. "Are they friendly?" Ni-kon's voice was soft but sturdy despite the wind and rain. Ube glanced down at her. Ni-kon's fox-like ears lay flat to her head, no doubt bothered by the wind. Her auburn hair whipped wildly across her face, quickly clumping together and sticking to her body as the rain and ocean soaked her. "I don't know yet," Ube replied. He watched as the person on the Hayakun Loguan who had spotted the Ginjeshu pointed at them and started yelling. In all recorded lore about the Hayakun Loguan, there were only three prominent types of encounters. First, the apparition would appear in storms. If the captain saw fit to follow, then they would inevitably make it through the storm safely. Second, upon seeing the Hayakun Loguan, it would attack with flaming arrows and bolts of fire, a scenario that, while possible, Ube was mostly unconcerned with. The third type of encounter was a little stranger than the previous two. The Hayakun Loguan would make port, and the crew would start unloading. Once most of their supplies was off the ship, they would reload it, believing that the crates and barrels were new supplies. Sometimes the Hayakun Loguan would take passengers, either ignorant of the stories about the ghost ship or saved by it, picked up out of the sea by a friendly passerby. Passengers would find themselves at a random port somewhere in the world after an unknown amount of time, with no memory of how they got there. "It's turning," Ni-kon stated. It was indeed turning. The sleek vessel was angling itself to intercept the Ginjeshu. "No," Ube said, taking a step back. "No what?" "You asked if they were friendly. The answer is no." Ube turned his head to the captain, who was still gawking at the ghost ship. "They're moving to intercept!" he yelled. The captain looked at Ube. "What?" he yelled back over the wind. "They're going to attack!" A flash of light caught Ube's attention, as well as the captain's, and everyone else's so long as they were on deck. Shouts of "Look out!" and "Incoming!" escaped the mouths of the sailors. Ube faced the brightly lit, gently arcing lights, at least a dozen flaming arrows and 2 large fireballs quickly making their way back down to the world after reaching the apex of their flight. Ni-kon reached a hand out to one of the fireballs, as if to grab it out of the air. She made a motion downward and said, "Jia!" The burning ball of fire followed her command, plummeting into the churning water. The other fireballs sailed harmlessly overhead, but most of the arrows buried themselves into the wooden vessel. Ube checked himself, then Ni-kon. They had not been hit. He wished he had a shield or a large plank, anything to protect Ni-kon and himself. Ni-kon turned her attention to the arrows burning intensely with magical fire, despite the rain and sea-soaked wood. "Kesu," she said, making a tight fist. The flaming arrows went out. Every captain who ventured out to sea past the sight of land knew what to do in the event of an attack by the Hayukun Leguan. As Ube repositioned himself at the bow of the ship, the Ginjeshu started turning towards the ghost ship. No junk could outrun the specter. Fleeing meant death, but for some reason, physically touching the vessel would make it disappear. Who discovered this tactic, or even when it was discovered, was unknown to Ube. Ni-kon positioned herself next to him. "This is exciting." "Exciting, yes. Pleasant, not so much," he replied, feeling better about his decision to stand to the bow, now that he knew the priestess would be beside him. "Can you keep their fire off us?" he asked, holding tightly to the bulwark, as another wave crashed over onto the deck. "It's difficult to keep my footing." Another volley of fire ascended from the ghost ship. "Do you remember Cyan Linsha?" she asked. Ube nodded. "I remember." He grabbed her firmly by the back of her black changshan. She let go of the bulwark. He would keep her balance for her. Ni-kon reached out to the oncoming projectiles with both hands, then brought her left hand back and out to the side. "Wan Hyo!" The fiery weapons altered course, not by much, but enough to miss the Ginjeshu. Ube's stomach lurched as the ship went over the crest of a swell. The vessel was angled 45 degrees into the massive waves, a bad place for a ship to be. Ube put a foot against the bulwark to keep himself, and by extension Ni-kon, upright as the ship below him pitched forward at a dangerous angle. To his relief, the boat didn't roll, but he wasn't sure if it could handle another crest. Along the downslope of a giant swell of water, the Ginjeshu and the Hayukun Leguan raced toward each other. He and Ni-kon stood at the bow and braced for impact. Ube forced himself to keep his eyes opened. The bowsprit of the Hayukun Leguan raced at him like a gigantic lance. Behind it stood a woman, her skin as inky black as a starless night. The whites of her eyes and teeth seemed to shine brightly in contrast to her skin color, as did the red in her irises and the scales that covered her shoulders and neck. Her shirt only covered one breast. Her dark hair was bound in thick frizzy strands, and she pointed a pure black double-edged sword at him. As the bowsprit intersected with the Ginjeshu, Ube noticed the lesser symbol of Iteyo branded into her flesh just below the collarbone. She and the terrible battle cry that emanated from her disappeared as the ghostly image passed through him and Ni-kon. All of the people on board, men and women, they all had different skin tones and hair colors, but they also all had patches of red scales, not in the same spot and not in the same quantity. Also, Ube noticed that most, if not all, the crew of the ghost ship had the lesser symbol of Iteyo prominently branded into their skin. The Hayukun Leguan was gone, and behind it was the trough of the sea swell. A massive amount of water collided with the Ginjeshu, and Ube feared that the vessel would shear in half. To his relief, it didn't. "Memories and emotions," Ni-kon said. "What?" "The ship, the crew, the whole thing. They feel like very distant memories and emotions, not spirits at all," she explained as the Ginjeshu turned into a much safer angle. "What does that mean?" "I don't know. It's just what I felt." She turned to head back below deck. "They all had the symbol of Iteyo." "I knew that." "Why would foreigners have a symbol of a god that created us?" he asked. Ni-kon shrugged. "No idea." She lifted a hand as she stumbled off. Let me know if anything else exciting happens." Ube looked back out over the angry sea. "That was strange," he mumbled to himself while stroking his beard.